Have you felt out of place as if something was off? Have you tried discovering to find out if you are secretly a member of the royal family? Have you been working your entire life like a sap because you think that's how you're going to reach economic stability? You may be entitled to compensation. Effects of the settlement include a makeover, a better haircut, losing social awkwardness, losing 10 pounds, never having to worry about money again. Call our office now to see if you qualify for pure luck and a chance at marrying a member of one of the existing royal families, or find out if you're the missing prince. Hello all, once again, with the help of Mothra, the trusty bunny of data science, we look at the representation of poor in the media to identify what's realistic, what's completely outlandish, what's missing, and what needs to improve. If you're interested in more stuff like this, feel free to like, subscribe, wherever the wind blows. With that, let's get into it. To start, why are we drawn to stories about rags to riches? In the article by Carmine Gallo linked in the description, it's partly due to the themes of struggle and redemption. It gives us character. It makes our story more interesting to listen to. If someone born into a rich family has a successful career, it's not seen as impressive as someone that grew up from the wrong side of the tracks that managed to fight their way to the top. For how this is affected by the pressure to succeed, I'll link that video here. As mentioned in other videos, many of us in the US grew up hearing about the American dream, and that you just have to work hard enough and you'll be successful. Which also implies if you're poor, it's your fault. In the 2013 study linked below about income mobility and its impact on emotional well-being, Americans generally have an optimistic view that the average person can improve their socioeconomic status within their lifetime. However, these studies focused on those aged 30 to 40, and I would be curious to see the results if the study was recreated today with a greater range of ages, especially after the pandemic. Being overly optimistic about upward socioeconomic mobility can lead to rash decisions and poor financial planning when combined with this type of mindset. It can also push us to pursue a career that may not be the best fit for us, or cause us to be ill-prepared or even ignore future risks. Another point from this study is that it skews our self-perception, and that positive self-relevant information is due to what we have done, whereas negative self-relevant information is due to environment or other outside factors. It doesn't allow us to be truly honest with ourselves and properly reflect on who we are or our skill set. If we look at the income inequality gap, it's almost unreal. One slight comment on the graph for this article: I have a slight issue with the fact that there's a straight jump instead of individual points for each year in the first portion. That said, 90% of wage earners stayed within the $30,000 yearly wage range, in contrast with the 0.1% that went from roughly $650,000 in 1979 to $2.9 million in 2019. But don't worry, they're totally worried about the income gap too, and hedge fund manager Bill Ackman and CEO of Pershing Square Capital Management sent a letter to shareholders that they are going to address these inequalities by opening an investment account for every child born in the US. I'm sure it's just an oversight that he didn't clarify if money would be added to these accounts. All this together, I think it feeds into why rags to riches movies that deal with royalty or the uber rich have success, or even why people might enjoy certain reality TV shows. It's a form of escape from reality that we live in. Another version of this trope is someone being the chosen one. It's not because the main character tries harder than everyone else to succeed, or that they have better skills. In movies such as The Princess Diaries, the rags to riches story is rarely a result of any work they have done, but rather pure chance that their lineage happens to be royal. It's this strange trope that getting out of poverty is due to secretly being a member of a royal family. To put into perspective how few royals exist, according to InfoPlease, there are 44 monarchies in the world, including the Vatican, and most are constitutional monarchies. For those of us in poverty, the chances of being a royal or marrying one feels the same as our ability to escape poverty for good or win the lottery. I guess we can't all secretly be a princess. Increasing net worth in this manner doesn't quite match that concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. In some cases, it takes a major life event such as winning the lottery, or, more likely, inheritance from a death in the family to bring any sort of major windfall. In Raising Hope, one of the main changes for Jimmy and Sabrina is when Sabrina inherits a large house after a family member passes, a house that would be extremely difficult for two people working at a grocery store to be able to afford otherwise. This trope works better in movies than TV because the story can be neatly wrapped up and leave the audience thinking that their problems are basically over. Even if there are sequels, it tends to follow the same pattern of no longer having to worry about a pesky little thing like money. If nothing else, they can at least cry in a big house or a nice car now. This is more difficult to pull off in a TV show, unless that is what the finale is leading up to. It's strange that the idea of the American dream persisted for so long, when TV shows certainly didn't seem to show this like the movies did. Rags to riches usually doesn't happen for families in poverty on TV shows unless it's related to illegal activities, like Walter White in Breaking Bad or Ruth in Ozark. While Ruth isn't necessarily rich, by being involved with the Bird family, she is able to gain substantial income that would probably not happen for her otherwise. Ozark takes place in Missouri in the Ozark area, of course. In this region of the U.S. in 2019, only 11% of the population has a 4-year degree or higher. The average per capita income was $18,739 a year, and 22.7% lived in poverty. Keep in mind, this is also prior to the pandemic, and the Ozark region gets a lot of business in the summer from tourism. Ruth is one of the, quote, rednecks, not hillbilly, that clearly has intelligence, but due to circumstance and local attitudes, is often pushed down. For her to escape poverty, she has to deal with the situation and culture around her. So when the Bird family comes in, it does come with more risk and danger, but it comes with more cash. She already has issues with the law, so it's not as if she was on the, quote, right path to begin with. Her situation isn't uncommon, and she's not going to find out that she's a long-lost royal. He might marry rich, but that's pretty unlikely.
Brace yourselves, everybody. You're about to see the hugest, juiciest, possibly super intelligent vegetables man has ever known. You might want to crane your necks upward now to save time. Ta-da!
TV shows also work to keep a general stasis, a particular normality, if you will. The Simpsons has several instances of this every time Homer changes jobs, Marge gets a job, or Bart gets an elephant. There are occasions where the show doesn't revert back, such as Lisa being vegetarian, but as far as socioeconomic status, the Simpsons remain living in the same house and in general at the same standard of living. In the data from the intro video I'll link here, that's a pretty realistic view because it's unlikely they will escape poverty. Well, except maybe Lisa. Not to mention, in reality, a family might end up worse off than before. In Malcolm in the Middle, the family generally stays at the same income level, though after the birth of the 5th child, Jamie, their net worth drops. Though Malcolm leaves for college and Frances doesn't live at home, a baby is expensive, and just because these two are out of the house doesn't mean that their family suddenly stops supporting them. For example, we see throughout the series how Frances occasionally comes back home or needs money. This is especially true for some of the younger generations. Due to inflation in housing costs, stagnant wages, and rising rents, many are forced to move back home just to be able to get above water. In the Roseanne reboot, The Connors, the children and the grandchildren move back into the family home because it is too expensive to live on their own. And Becky, Darlene, and DJ all have kids, so there are actually more people in the house than before. Even though the data shows that escaping poverty is difficult, why do we still cling to this weak thread that we will end up rich? There was a short period of time in the US where the American dream was possible for some Americans, but that certainly hasn't been true in recent years. An element of this is toxic positivity. I'm not saying that looking at the brighter side of life is a bad thing, or that the opposite is a good thing. There is a difference between positivity and toxic positivity. There are quite a few articles and books out there on this topic, but to simplify for this video, I'm going to use the structure from the 2020 article from Health Online, since it encompassed many of the same points from other sources. Toxic positivity can cause us to ignore real harm and stay in unsafe or unhealthy situations. It can make it more difficult to grieve after losing someone. It encourages isolation and stigma, communication issues, and low self-esteem. By ignoring emotions and hiding behind a smile, it prevents us from being honest about how we feel and makes us less likely to seek help.
I want you to smile today.
But I don't feel like smiling.
Well, it doesn't matter how you feel inside, you know? It's what shows up on the surface that counts. That's what my mother taught me. Take all your bad feelings and push them down.
It also prevents us from being able to better ourselves, as part of personal growth means being able to honestly evaluate what we need to do to improve. As an example, during my first year of undergrad, several students went to therapy because they felt they weren't happy enough. Issues with the poor having access to mental health services is part of a future video.
Lisa, I apologize to you. I was wrong. I take it all back. Always be yourself. You want to be sad, honey? Be sad. We'll write it out with you. And when you get finished feeling sad, we'll still be there. From now on, let me do was smiling for both of us.
For now, I want to focus on how toxic positivity is part of the reason we are drawn to the rags to riches stories. Going back to the 2013 study and how it points out that it pushes us to make poor decisions, when this is combined with toxic positivity, it can make us more vulnerable to get-rich-quick schemes, multi-level marketing, and other scams. There are countless videos about MLMs, so I will leave that specifically out for the moment. Living in poverty is tough, and you have hope that things will get better. Hearing about a so-called great business opportunity while living in a vulnerable state can lead us to make poor choices. The problem with the rags to riches trope is that it's often focused on the character making these types of decisions. In the 2006 movie The Pursuit of Happyness, Chris Gardner struggles with a myriad of issues, such as being homeless, and the climax of the movie is that he manages to secure a job as a stockbroker after a difficult internship, with a message at the end that he managed to form his own brokerage firm. Today, he helps create low-income housing in San Francisco and creates employment opportunities. One takeaway from the movie is that it was his hard work and attitude that got him there, which I won't disagree with. However, shouldn't we be asking why he felt he had to hide so much of his struggle until he was successful? Shouldn't we be looking into the issues with unpaid internships and how they disproportionately hurt the poor? His experiences are part of what motivated his work in San Francisco, and it's disappointing that this wasn't really mentioned in the movie. The Polka King is based on Jan Lewin, who gained money through a Ponzi scheme. He struggled to get to his current position in life, that working hard thing, and wasn't making enough to take care of his family and keep the polka band afloat. Originally, he tried to take on more honest work, but when that didn't pan out, he started asking people to invest in his band and later other things connected with his business. Of course, this gets the attention of the government. He goes to prison and slowly loses everything. One of the things in the movie I want to point out is that if he says he wants something, he says it out loud until it's true. Remember that toxic positivity thing from earlier? Also, it wasn't the hard work that was getting him to an economically stable position. It was the illegal stuff. Self-Made is a short series about Madam C.J. Walker, inspired by how she created her hair product company. I mention inspired specifically because there are inaccuracies, as this was written to be a more fictionalized version. Before she takes the name Madam C.J. Walker, she is Sarah Breedlove and started as a washerwoman who created a product to regrow hair. Throughout the miniseries, she deals with competing businesses, issues within her family, and the racism and sexism of business in that era in order to create her business. Again, it's a story of rags to riches and the struggles of how she worked to get there, but I think when we focus on one person's story in this manner, especially when it's set in the past, it's easy to forget that many of the roadblocks that existed for her back then are still there today. When it comes to the more negative side of rags to riches, and if it was gained through illegal or unethical means, it doesn't seem to discourage those types of actions. The Polka King mentioned previously is just one example, but there are more. Upton Sinclair was an author that heavily critiqued capitalism, and this is shown in his various writings. There Will Be Blood is very loosely inspired by his novel Oil. In There Will Be Blood, Daniel Plainview is a poor prospector that manages to become wealthy through his business in oil. One review from Rotten Tomatoes says that it's a, quote, sparse and sprawling epic about the underhanded heroes of capitalism, end quote. In the previous video about adaptations and accessibility, I touched on the idea that an adaptation can lead us to read the source material, and in this case, I highly recommend it because the movie does not do this novel justice. In the novel Oil, there is more critique towards how the workers are unethically treated and how religion is used as a tool or distraction to take advantage of vulnerable and poor people. Jay Ross creates this oil company, hoping his son will take over. Part of the reason his son declines is that he doesn't agree with how things are run. The oil company clearly sees the employees as expendable, and when accidents or spills occur, it's viewed purely in forms of economic effect to the corporation. This company is able to continue in this fashion because they are able to control the narrative and local government. One of the things that Sinclair was trying to point out is that Jay Ross reached the so-called American dream, but it was at the expense of the poor, the exploitation of media, and unethical business practices that went unchecked. A couple other examples that I will briefly mention. The Founder centers on a story of Ray Kroc taking over the fast food company from the McDonald brothers. The Godfather is about a family that gains power and influence by legal and illegal means. Scarface is about a Cuban refugee that has a business in illegal substances. The Wolf of Wall Street is about a guy that got involved in stocks and illegal activities. With all these examples and data showing the unlikelihood of working to escape poverty for good, why then do we go to these rags to riches stories? Hope. While toxic positivity is something to avoid, hope is actually one of those things in American culture that can thrive. Rags to riches stories give us hope that things can get better. It can motivate us to get an education for a shot at a brighter future. It can help us see the light at the end of the tunnel to escape toxic or negative situations. Hope pushes us to create a better future for our friends and family. Hope means that we don't just have to accept things. I'm going to end on a sort of rags to riches story that really encompasses how hope can lead to a brighter future. Meet the Robinsons. Lewis is creative and hopes for a family, knowing that teenagers are less likely to get adopted, and he is turning 13. Not only is he adopted as an older child, but his adopted parents fully encourage his interests and wholeheartedly support his journey towards being successful. He is part of a loving family, has support, and keeps moving forward. We don't need more princess stories. We need more Meet the Robinsons. Till next time.